G'day people, I'm Sharon. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm starting a series about a quilt I made or helped to put together for somebody else. Grace came into the store where I was working about a year and a half ago, wondering if somebody could help her to put together the 49 candle-wicked squares she had done. We looked at the problem together and sorted it out. And indeed I did finish off her quilt for her. In doing that, I learned a lot about what you need to do if you're making a bunch of squares, how to put them together, and maybe I can give you some hints about the way you should go about it. One of the things you'll notice is that I have indicated in each case what is the direction of the warp or weft thread. I'm not sure which one I actually did now, but I had to be consistent about it. If you're putting squares together and the warp on one is going this way and the warp on the other is going in the other direction, they're going to fight. And as much as possible, getting everything the same direction really helps. Doesn't matter if they're this way or this way, but definitely not that way. So that was a starting point. If you're trying to work out what's the warp and what's the weft on a fabric, the weft is the one that if you put your thumbs close together and stretch, you can actually pull the fabric and get your thumbs a little bit apart. On the warp, you generally can't because that thread is so much stronger. You will be able to bend it on the weft. As you're going through the designs, you'll see that some of the designs, particularly I think there were two hearts, where the weft thread meant that the hearts were going sideways. And that doesn't matter in a quilt. If you're in a position where you can put them hanging over the sides of the bed, you can still make them upright. You just can't have them on the top of the bed. So that's one thing, warp and weft, it matters. The next thing that really mattered was how the size of the embroidery compared to the size of the squares. Squares were all a little bit different in how big they were, the fabric, and the designs were a bit different too. Most of these designs Grace made up herself, inspiration from various places, and she thought it out and worked them out, and over a period of a long time she sat and did the embroideries, drawing in each case what she wanted to have on her embroideries. Now, one of the problems, if you've done that, is that if you've got a design that goes closer to the edge, sometimes when you're doing that embroidery, it pulls in the fabric and you end up with the outside edge of the fabric not being as big as it was when you started. So that can have an effect. There was in fact at least one design in here where size of the design was bigger than the physical amount of fabric on a different design, and that meant I couldn't put the two of them into the same quilt, not unless I was going to take part of the embroidery out of it, and that would have looked odd. Turns out there were so many of these designs and the quilt would have been so huge that we used 42 out of the 49 designs, and it was still a big quilt. So the things you're going to see on this little display now for the next 4 minutes or so are the physical dimensions of the embroidery, the physical dimensions of the fabric, and also the weft or warp direction. Finally, there is a little note to me to tell me which position it was going to end up in the final quilt. That was actually added later on. But I needed all of these numbers in order to work out what size I could make every square in the quilt. So now that we've looked at Grace's amazing designs, I'm going to give you a few hints if you're doing something similar. I would highly recommend that if you are going to make your own designs, try and be fairly consistent about the size you make them, and give yourself plenty of breathing room from the edge of the design to the edge of the fabric. That allows you some wiggle room when you're doing the cutting out to actually be able to get all your designs into a quilt. The next thing is that Grace, while she was doing her embroidery, she put a lightweight gauze behind the wadding and stitched through all of that, which worked fine for me. I added a backing fabric, which you will see me do in future parts of this series, but it's something for you to think about how exactly you're going to do that, how you're going to get a backing on. Probably the most important part of this was that Grace didn't have all of the designs exactly the same size, which is fair enough. They're not always going to be exactly the same size, but they do need to be able to be joined together and not have one looking very small and another very large. At the end of all my measuring, I had to work out what was the appropriate size for me to make each square. I think it was a little bit over 13 inches. And next time we'll have a look at how I put backing on it and use the even feed foot for that. See you next time.